She works as an independent coach, consultant, and trainer. She holds an MA in business coaching and change management, a diploma in English in product engineering, and a BA in education. She has a unique experience in applying agile processes within medium-sized to large distributed mission-critical projects. She will talk about addressing complexity, and with that said, welcome on stage.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Actually, I did my yoga, but in the morning, so that's maybe good. Yeah, so just if you want to know more about me, I guess my books speak most about me. And what I want to talk about today is related, or actually part of the latest book that I co-wrote together with John Buck. It's that one, it's the Bossa Nova book, Company-Wide Agility. And I want to focus on addressing complexity by learning fast. So first of all, I want to focus on the what. The what is about, like, what do we actually mean when we hear complexity? What's our understanding? And I want you to go to menti.com and use the code, and you see it all on the top of the slide. Use the code 16249859, and just let me know what comes to your mind when you hear the word complexity. So what is it that triggers that for you? What do you associate with it? Again, go to menti.com and use the code 16249859, and you can use your phone, or you just go to another tab in your browser and go there, and yeah, let me know. You can type in a word or several words and submit that, and let me know what you think about that. Okay, so at least I'm always happy when I see the first ones, because I always wonder, does it work or doesn't it? So okay, so we have education, complexity is awesome, maybe it's interesting. I don't know if there are any other people who have any opinion about that. So again, menti.com 16249859. We see that it's non-linear, it's a system, it's difficult, or provides difficulties or looks at difficulties, it's challenging, it's a leader's blind spot very often. Cost, awesome. Difficulty gets bigger and difficult, and challenge is getting bigger. And what else? A lot connection, hard to understand. What else do I see here? Thinking, tiresome, waste, boring. Oh, and you're still in this session. I'm sorry about that. So I bore you. Relationship is what I saw. Making it smaller, I think, was somewhere. Splitting to smaller, I like that. Okay, you can still bring it in, but I really see from this, again, so I'm more looking at the company level and what complexity does to an organization. It actually means, with all the challenge, difficulty, interesting, but also like lot data, burdensome, and so on, it really asks companies to actually be agile. And by being agile, I mean agile in the literal sense, being flexible, adaptive, responsive, fast, and all of that. And this is actually what Bossa Nova is about. So Bossa Nova looks at the company from different perspectives. So these are the 4 perspectives beyond budgeting, open space, Sociocracy, and agile. However, I don't want to look at these individual perspectives today, but more or less how this holistic looking at a company helps us addressing complexity. So it's not today diving into the different perspectives, but what Bossa Nova offers to address complexity. So what? Well, let's look into, well, as quick as possible, into understanding complexity. We heard like it's hard to understand. Like one of the things is there are different models looking into complexity. The one that's, I believe, in the Agile community, the best known or most shared is the one from Dave Snowden. It's the Kinefin. What you see right here, the model actually evolves and changes always a little bit. And more or less it says, well, you start somewhere here, well, whatever start. So if things are really known, then so kind of in the known space, you can use best practices and just keep doing what you're doing. So things are clear. If they are complicated, you need to have an expertise to know what you're doing and to solve the problem. Often people say like repairing a watch. So there it's good practice. It's also like the way you're dealing with it is sensing, analyzing, and then responding. And now going to the complex space, where it says, well, it's emergent practices. And the way you're working on it is probe, sense, respond. Keep that in mind because we will work with that as well. And then there's also chaotic and unordered in the middle. Okay, so this is one model. I said, I want to do this really as quickly as possible. Then there's another model, which is Stacy, who says, well, no agreement, no predictability means chaos. She says complete agreement is more like simple, obvious, or in Snowden's Now Times wording, it's clear. Complex means you can't know cause and effect, only patterns. However, the really important stuff that Stacy brings in, that probes start with reflexive inquiry, which is thinking about how you are thinking. So what are you assuming and why are you assuming it? So this is kind of what he brings in. And remember that, I will also come back to this. Then there's another model, which is one that's often not seen, which is called, well, which is originated by Glenda A.O. Young, and it's called HSD for Human Systems Dynamics, and says in every complex space, what we have is different containers. So these are circles like those, or the bigger one, or the overlapping ones. And the circle can be like, well, actually containers. So circles is how I illustrated it. Containers, like the container we are building right now in this session, we are kind of all interested in addressing complexity by learning fast with Bossa Nova. I don't know, are you more here because of, well, this is the only thing that's running, or because you're interested really in learning about this, or in the Bossa Nova, or maybe meeting friends or whatever. So this is the container, is what brings us together. Then you see inside the container, there are different shapes, which means there are differences. We are not the same, although we have at this point the same interests. So stuff brings us together, but we still differ. And then there are exchanges. These are the dotted lines between the different shapes and also between the containers, which is kind of how we interact and communicate. And all of these things together, like if the container has a lot of differences, typically then you know that there is, well, a complex situation, or maybe there's even chaos. And therefore, just kind of leaning forward already, it might sometimes mean reducing the container helps you addressing complexity, or maybe reducing differences or increasing differences if you want to have more complexity because you need to be more innovative. So Glenda A.O. Young has a different look at complexity than Dave Snowden and Ralph Stacey. And all of those together is what I try to bring together today in this short time frame. Let's see. Okay, so addressing complexity means that predictions that we are making, well, predictions are always to the future, they are really accurate. And therefore, we have to be ready to adjust our forecast. So we just assume something will happen and this is our prediction. But on the other hand, we know right away that this will never happen because things are changing and because we're in this complex situation. However, the more perspective we are getting into that prediction, into that idea, into our plan for the future, the less likely it is that we are completely off. So does this ring a bell maybe already? Because if we have cross-functional teams, what we also tried with that is bringing together different perspectives. and maybe this is also what we need to do in other circumstances if we are in a complex situation, bringing in a lot of different perspectives for reducing the likelihood of being completely off. And then the other thing is testing ideas quickly and just start a learning process in a safe way by making small steps and learn from that. Okay, so now what? What can we do? How does this look like? And I want to first share an example. And the one example that I'm having is referring to a discussion in a company I'm aware of. Well, actually, I can't even share it. It's Mayflower, a German software and consulting company. And they also do a lot of actual stuff. And there were some people who said, well, we have that feeling how bonuses and salary increases are decided are not really agile. So we are not happy with it. Now, I guess we all know this is a really, well, let's say, difficult situation. It is also a complex situation because you have to balance all different forces, and probably you know more in hindsight and all of that. But the difficulty comes in with all the different humans and the different expectations they're having. Okay, so people were not satisfied in the way bonuses and salaries and salary increase have been decided. So there were some people who got together, and let's see how they did that. They got together, and the first thing was more or less, they reduced the container. So I think there were just a handful of people saying, well, we really want to make that different. So they tried an idea. And their first idea that they tried and want to learn from was they were sharing what they're earning, which was complete news because people typically don't do that, especially not in Germany. I'm not sure in all the other countries you are from, but this is not what people do. However, they shared their salaries. And it was kind of a surprise because it opened up a discussion there, and it opened up like other possibilities. They had a good experience with that, and therefore they decided, well, what about if we share it to the rest of the company, not only within our own little container, so we have an interaction and exchange to the rest of the company, or if you use HSD speak, to the rest of the containers, so you increase that part. And so they did. And interesting enough, it was that now other people started sharing their salary, and they had a lot of discussions around that and said, well, I don't know, is this fair? Is this good? Is it not? What can we do about it? So all of a sudden, salary discussions were possible, and people actually, just jointly started thinking about what can we do to change that, to make it more agile, to make it more like that we feel we are in that. And so what they then did, they came up with a process. However, that process has really changed many times. And the way that I will share with you right now that they came up with actually is, again, I'm pretty sure is not the one they are using right now, because they keep changing it. So what I know that they started doing was like, well, at first they look at, and this is the managers, they look at what money is actually available. Well, you need some data, right? And then they have an elected person who takes part in all discussions around salary. Then management defines what are the values they really would like people to focus on. For example, it's like helping achieve both customer and team satisfaction, but it's also about how does the person help peers to learn, and how does the person learn him herself, and so on. And then they had this salary discussion in a meeting where several people participate. Well, the person under discussion, the person who is elected, being responsible for all the salary discussions, the director of the branch, and then some peers, the person under discussion invited. And then they had an open dialogue, like how they think that person really performs, and where the person needs help, and what are the achievements and underachievements and all of that. And then everyone secretly, it's kind of like planning poker, secretly writes a suggested salary on a sticky note. And then they all show all at once, again, like planning poker, what they came up with. And then they have another discussion and they settle on a given number for that person. And after they have gone through all the discussion with the people, then they look for the suggested salaries, if this is in line with the money that's available. And if it's not, then they kind of adjust it over everyone. So it's not like it's only adjusted for one person, but just for all of them. So what you see there is like, well, reducing containers, having interactions, knowing about the differences, then making small steps, having an idea, trying it out, learning from it, making it safe as well. And basically, if we try to put this in a maybe more defined way, what they did was they started by reflecting on the situation they were in, and then coming up with a probe. Remember, the probe sense respond, but you could also think of probes as, well, little experiments, or I often refer to them as small safe to fail experiments that are based on a hypothesis that is derived from your reflection. And then you try that, and then you reflect again and see if things have improved or not. And then you come up with something else and you try that and you see if you have improved or not. And what's also important is, well, then also publish about what you learned. Publish to your peers about what you learned. Well, of course, definitely internally, because you might want to spread it in the company. At least that's what Mayflower had in mind here. But also what they did, well, they shared it to the world because, well, I know about it and I can share it with you. So it is, we can all learn from other people's probes. Okay, let's take a look again at these individual steps, what they mean and how they could run. So the first one was reflect on your situation. So you first look at what is the situation that you feel like, well, maybe we really would like to change that. So we want to probe that situation. And then remember what I shared about Stacy. How are we thinking about this situation? What are we assuming? What would it be like if we didn't make that assumption? So really question the situation in order to learn something from it. And derive from that your hypothesis. I come to that just when designing probe in the next slide. A key thing that I always feel when I see people getting started with something like that, it's really important to stay small. So don't start with something really big. And maybe my example was changing how we decide on salaries is too big. However, it really started small. It wasn't like, well, we intend to change the whole company. The first thing was, well, what about if we just start sharing what we are all earning, and then we see how it goes. Well, it's really kind of one step, reflect again, see what's happening, share your learnings, and do the next thing. So, and do a small thing. Then the next step, maybe I go back first. So we were here, right? Reflect on our situation. Now we go to design probes. So design probes, based on your reflection and your assumptions, so you come up with a hypothesis where you assume what you think will happen if you make this and that experiment. And then you come up with an experiment, so, or maybe a series of experiments, and that those experiments are really used for testing your assumption. So you kind of know, well, is that really true what we assumed here? And you measure it. You check your ideas against your assumption, against your hypothesis. So that's the next thing. And then you publish to your peers. And the publishing to your peers often actually, I feel, is forgotten, especially if we talk about, well, almost anything on which is a bit difficult stuff on the organizational level. I often feel we are not talking enough about that. And on the one hand, it is really we collaboratively, also our community learns just by knowing from others what they have done and tried and what worked for them. So maybe we want to try that as well. Or maybe we just see what's happening for them and right away think, well, okay, that wouldn't work for us. So collaborative learning depends on sharing the learnings of everyone. The other thing is what especially I learned, but I know a lot of other people as well, is once you start publishing about the learnings, and publishing doesn't have to be big as like what you see here, like anything that's in print. It can also be just sharing it in your company with team members, with another team or with a colleague or whatever. Whenever you start reflecting on a probe, on what has happened, automatically you learn again by going through this, because you learn by understanding actually what has happened here. We did this and then what? Because very often if we are part of a probe, then we don't have that possibility to step back and have that broader look at what's happening really. So the sharing, the publishing is also helping the person who is sharing. It's also helping the learning there. Okay, so this would be the probe that Mayflower actually used, and it is kind of bringing together that cycle, reflect on a situation, designing probes, trying an experiment and sharing it. And it is here starting with a name for the probe. Here it's compute decision-making about promotion, support, alignment. There's a background for that, which is kind of what's the situation at the beginning, that they see that, well, they need a promotion system somehow, or they feel, or they have one, and just thinking about it. And then the hypothesis is that if they use peer decision-making about the promotion, and also then they can maybe separate performance review from decisions such as promotion that have an element of competition. And then they have their experiment, where they first survey it, so they have some measurements, then they try it out for a specific time, like here 3 months, and if it's improving, they extend it to other groups. Now, just for that understanding that it really doesn't have to be that big, I want to share a different example. And if you have seen some of my talks, you might have seen that already, because it's one of my favorites. And it is a probe that has been implemented by a bank. So the bank board of directors, and this is this picture is my personal imagination of how the room for the board of directors might look like. I bet for that bank it completely looked different. And sorry, I can't share the name of the bank. However, so they reflected on their situation and thought, well, what about if we remove the table? Can we think more creatively and have a more open and honest discussion? And so they tried it. So they just removed that, well, in this picture, big oak table here, and just were sitting there, which has a little bit of vulnerability because they cannot hide behind the tables anymore. And what they discovered not only has changed during the board of directors meetings, their discussion on like how open and honest and maybe even fluid the communication really went, and how creative as well, but also that their communication, or again, if you think of HSD talk, their exchanges to the outside, so to the rest of the bank, was also more open and honest. So just removing that table, which is a really small, inexpensive probe, removing that table, trying that out. If it's not working, put it back in, nothing really, no big deal. You could even also say, well, maybe we have a different room where there is no table and we just meet there. So that would be fine as well. So the thing really is, it doesn't have to be big in order to make a huge difference, but with a small step, and by thinking of like, okay, what are the relationships, the exchanges we are having, the differences, the containers of that complex situation, and what is that small step we can do to maybe test our or probe our assumption here. So looking back on the future, plans are often based on belief that the future will be the same as the past. And therefore, feed-forward thinking helps you look at your assumptions, again, remember Stacy, and base your plans on leading indicators, not on past results. And so you can probe the future through reflecting, hypothesizing, and safe-to-fail experiments. Or if I try to sum this up, like learning fast really means thinking beyond agility. And it does mean you need to keep probing, that is reflecting, hypothesizing, experimenting. Measuring is something we often forget. And then sharing as well. So that's the sharing part is, I think, most often the thing that's forgotten, at least from what I've seen. So the important thing is small steps, and it all starts with reflection. So reflection is, for me, I think, the key to any kind of change. And that's maybe the thing really that Stacy brings in, where Snowden is saying, well, you just go ahead and probe. Well, Stacy says, well, test your assumptions first. Wonder about how you're thinking. So really have a reflection, and based on that, come up with your probe. And then if you design a probe, you can think of, do you want to have a change in the container, in the differences, in the exchanges? And then try that experiment, reflect again, and share your learnings, which is so important. So we're coming to an end here. So thank you so much, and stay in touch. So you can reach me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and of course also classically. And actually, we are really proud that the Bossa Nova book is being translated at the moment. What's underway or in progress is here, Korean and French, and what we have is traditional Chinese, German, and Spanish. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'm curious to hear about your questions.
Thank you so much. I believe that was a really awesome talk, and I surely learned a thing or two about not forgetting to measure the things that one does. It's definitely true of me. I have to give a testimonial to that. To our attendees, our Q&A is open, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the question tab. While we wait for the questions, I want to show you our little thank you gift that we will be sending you. I think it turned out quite well.
Wow, thank you.
So thank you very much for this talk. There is the first question. In the reflection part, how can you find the things that are important to reflect on, to be sure you did not miss anything important?
So first of all, I'm 100% sure you will miss anything. It's, well, especially in a complex situation, there's just no way of really capturing everything. And this is fine because we just do one step after the other, and therefore it doesn't really matter. So we reflect on the thing that's disturbing us, the thing where we realize this is not helpful right now for us. And therefore we feel like we need to get out of this situation. And then actually it's really more making it smaller, because then the smaller it is, I think the easier it often at least is to make a change. So starting a change on something big, well, which also means you need to have a lot of people's commitment, and maybe it also costs a lot of money and all of that. This all makes it harder. So maybe my answer is relax, it doesn't matter, it's fine. It's fine because you will never ever be able to reflect on everything.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that answer. I think that should calm everybody down who wants to reflect, because if you know that you can't do it perfectly, then you don't need to worry about doing it perfectly. You can just do as much as you can.
Exactly.
And the things that come to your mind are probably the most important things anyway.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. I think that is all the questions that we had for now. So thank you so much for sharing this model with us. And thank you for joining us for the conference. I hope you can stay with us for the rest of 4 days.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this wonderful conference together. And now I wonder, because there are not so many questions, if this was too fast or whatever. Well, we'll see. Maybe everyone needs to digest this.
Time to process. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.